Good morning. Today is the 1st of Kislev, Rosh Chodesh Kislev, the 14th of November. And we are up to page 199 in this mimer from the Rebbe Rashab, after the parentheses on top, about 8 lines down. V'lachin. So yesterday we said that because there's so much what we call or pnimi, integrated light, meaning so much revealed knowledge of the soul in the mind. The mind is more aware of the soul. The soul integrates into the mind much more than it does anywhere else. Because of that, we actually can't see the soul itself, meaning the person doesn't feel the soul itself, and he actually can feel it much more in the other parts of the body. And that, by the way, is, I didn't say this yesterday, but that's what they call today mindfulness. When they say mindfulness today, really what they mean is that you become aware of your soul. That's really the idea behind it. So what they do is they focus on other body parts. And you have to focus on other body parts because, like we said, in the brain, there's too much going on. There's too much of the soul is conscious and apparent. It reveals itself because you're thinking all the time. That's the soul. That's the life force. So they try to focus on something else. So they think about their hand, they think about their foot, they think about your breathing. Breathing is very good because breathing is not conscious usually. That's the autonomous nervous system. So all these things, that's what they really mean when they say mindfulness. It's important to know what they do. Mindfulness is a very good thing, by the way. There's a lot of studies on it, and the Rebbe was at least not against it. I don't know if that was what he was thinking of, but when the Rebbe talked about meditation that would be helping someone calm down, relax, relieve stress, the way you do that is that stress is from the conscious part of the soul. So you focus on the unconscious parts. And everywhere else in the body, the soul is sort of unconscious. It's not, you don't really feel it until you put your mind to it, and that's what mindfulness means. But there's a very interesting thing that comes out of this, and that's what we'll see today. And he says, because of this, because where there is a lot of revealed light, meaning integrated light, what we call or pnimi, the inner light, or light that can be internalized, again, that shows up as consciousness, it shows up as something that you're conscious of. For that reason, the Torah does not discuss Mesiras Nefesh openly. The Torah doesn't discuss the requirement to be Meiser Nefesh, to sacrifice yourself. Where does it say you have to? How do we learn that there Yiharegu Bal Yavo? How do we know that there are 3 mitzvos? That you have to sacrifice yourself, and if you don't, then it's the worst avera.
3 mitzvahs, right.
So how do we know that? Where do we know this from? There's no psukim. Doesn't say that you're doing it to someone else.
Yeah, right.
How do you know about yourself? So the learning is indirect because the Torah doesn't say it openly. It doesn't say those words. You should die and not transgress these prohibitions are never said in the Torah openly. The sages learn them indirectly from the verses. Why is this? Because, now he explains, because Torah shebechtav, the whole Torah was meant to be something that was understood to the people that received it. That's Torah shebechtav. Torah shebechtav is meant to be understood. Torah shebe'al peh, that's going into the Torah shebechtav in ways that are new, meaning all kinds of methods that we use to understand the text. But initially, lo nitna Torah ela le'ochlei haman, it says, that the Torah wasn't given but to the generation that was eating the man. What that means is it was given in a vernacular that they could understand. It wasn't spoken in a way that you would have to go somewhere, like Moshe Rabbeinu says, lo me'ever layami. It's not across the sea, you have to bring some interpreter and he'll tell you what this means, and so on. It was written and said in a language that people then understood, which translates for us as being in a language that is conscious, that is understood. In the same way that you understand your own mind, you're privileged to understand it. It's open to you. It's not about something that's far and distant. It's not ol makif. It's not a surrounding light, as we call it. Torah shebechtav is meant to be, to put on your heart something that you can fully understand. But because of that, dafka because of that, because it's, and we call this chokhmah. Chokhmah is something that is according to reason. I mean, there has to be reason there. It's according to my mind and my conscious mind. והשכל מחייב רק ההתפעלות שעל פי הטעם ודעת, ולא בחינת מסירות נפש, הוא התפעלות עצם הנפש שלמעלה מטעם ודעת. And what the mind requires, all that the mind can speak about, is that you are required to do everything you're capable of in service of God. But to do something that's above what I'm capable of, to sacrifice myself, that the Torah doesn't talk about openly, because it's not part of it. It would be like the mind going out of itself. It could, theoretically, but then nobody would understand what it's talking about. So it has to be within the limits of what can be understood, what can be felt, what you can be conscious of. And to do Mesiras Nefesh is above reason. It's above anything that we can comprehend, because in the end, what is our thinking? The thinking is like we have by Shabbos. Chalel alav shavat achat, kedei shishmor shavatot arbeh. You should how do you say? Chalel Shabbos. Transgress one Shabbos to save someone, so that someone can keep many Shabbos. That's the logical, that's the reasonable approach to the prohibitions of the Torah. That sometimes you have to transgress them. But to say, no matter what, you should not worship false gods, no matter what do you mean? I'll worship him now as if, and then I'll be able to live a good full life serving true God.
Well, we don't do that.
Right? And then suddenly the sages say, no. When it comes to these things, if it's done under certain conditions, of course, you have to sacrifice your life. But that makes no sense. That comes from what we call the makif. That comes from the surrounding light, which is beyond the consciousness, which is beyond the reason. So the Torah couldn't speak about this. So again, this is a beautiful corollary, that in the same way that I can't feel the very essence of what my soul is, I can't feel my soul itself in my mind, I can only feel it in the distant, far reaches of my body. There I feel that I exist, I feel the soul not as thoughts, not as something that is encroaching upon my consciousness. Again, this is mindfulness. I can think about something else. Wow, I feel that I'm alive. I feel that there's life force there, but it's not like the life force in the mind, which because of so many trees you can't see the forest. But whether it's sparse or not as conscious life force, like in the other extremities of the body, there it's much easier to feel it. Same thing with the Torah. Where the Torah is talking, it can't talk about what's above, what's beyond. What is beyond is what the essence of the Torah is. The essence of the Torah can't appear in the Torah itself. It's like saying that it's very, very beautiful corollary between the two. And therefore, people find it very difficult to feel pleasure and the will itself of the soul in their mind. They can't feel it there. Because there it's only a glimmer. You only get a glimmer of it. And this is the reason that those who have great intellect, who are very scholarly and very learned, they find it hardest to sacrifice themselves. Because they have many thoughts. And it's hard for them to go beyond. Yeah. So, קשה לו לפעול אצלו כוח המסירות נפש, לכל דרכיו והילוכו הוא רק על פי השכל, שהוא מסתיר על עצם הנפש. Because everything that he does, all his conduct is according to his mind. And when it's according to the mind, the essence of the soul, again, why does the Torah tell us you need to sacrifice yourself? If we go a little bit deeper into it. The reason is because if you were aware of the soul itself, you would see that if you would transgress these three prohibitions, the big three, Avodah Zarah, Shvichus Damim, Gilui Arayos, if you would transgress those three, your soul would be disconnected from godliness, completely kares. You would have no connection anymore. But that you can only feel if you feel the soul itself. If you all you feel is the way the soul appears as thoughts, then you never feel that disconnect. You can never feel that is what's going to happen. ועל פי כל הנ"ל יובן מה שיותר נקל לאדם להושיט עקבו במים רותחים ביותר מהראש. And for this reason, now we finally come, this is the reason why it's easier for a person when he's testing the waters to see how hot they are, to put his heel into the water and not put his head into the water. Because apparently the heel has no problem to sacrifice itself. And because it's like a completely different feeling there of life force. Even though, as far as the makif is concerned, again, the surrounding light that is beyond the consciousness, it's all the same. The heel has exactly the same amount of soul as the brain does in terms of the soul itself. The soul itself encompasses the entire body equally. That's what we call a makif. That's what we call a surrounding light, that it equalizes everything. But I don't feel that in the head. In the head, it's harder for me, meaning I'm conscious of the fact that it's going to be very hot, or it could be very hot. It's much easier for me to do it to sacrifice my heel, as it were, because the heel doesn't have that problem of being so conscious of itself. מפני שהעקב הוא המדרגה היותר אחרונה שבגוף ואין בו מבחינת המוחין כלל, כי אם הערה יותר אחרונה ונעלמת ביותר, again, because the heel has less and less consciousness, it has less and less awareness of itself. I don't have awareness of it. And therefore it's much easier for me to put it into a place that could be very hot, could be very dangerous. It's easier for me, as it were, to sacrifice there. Again, it's going to hurt maybe as much in the end. It doesn't matter. And this we said that the Alter Rebbe, when he used to take a bath on Friday night, on Friday before Shabbos, then he used to use much hotter water on the head, because he said that the head can actually tolerate much warmer water than the rest of the body, which is true. But again, because of the consciousness, it's much harder to put the head. It's harder in the beginning to feel this, that the head can tolerate more. Hine, פעולת והתגברות הרצון שבנפש, just skip the parentheses, is saying the same thing. הנה פעולת והתגברות הרצון שבנפש שם ביותר מבראש, שאין שום דבר מסתיר כלל. There is more willpower, as it were, of the soul, which is closer to the essence of the soul, in the heel than there is in the head, because there is nothing interrupting my feeling of the soul itself in the heel. And again, this is counterintuitive in the beginning. If you don't understand the difference between makif and pnimi, in the beginning this sounds counterintuitive. Why does it sound counterintuitive? Because you think the place where I have the most consciousness, that's the place where I have the most control. He says that's true in terms of your consciousness, in terms of your conscious and revealed thought patterns. But when it comes to sacrificing something, that is actually the impediment. The more you are conscious of yourself, the less you can sacrifice. The person who knows a lot, for instance, I mean, think about when somebody has to go through surgery. So a person who has to do surgery on himself, that's very, very difficult. That's close to impossible. Some people have done it when they actually had to, but it's very, very difficult. So what do you have to do? So you actually get someone else who doesn't know what you're feeling, who doesn't know what's going through your head, and then they put you under. They give you anesthesia. Complete anesthesia, and then they can do all this. Why? Because you have to get rid of the consciousness. If the consciousness is going to be there, it's going to disrupt the whole operation. You can't do anything, because the consciousness is what we call internalized light of the soul. It is an internalized revelation of the soul, and because of that, it conceals the soul itself. So that's a very important observation that he's making here. ולכן מפני הרצון בעצם נפשו להושיט עקבו במים רותחים תכף ומיד הוא נשמע לרצונו בלי שום עיכוב כלל ומושיטה למים הרותחים, and because of this the heel is much more able to follow the will, and the will again is closer to the essence of the soul that says I now need to test the waters, and the heel is willing to do it. Why? Because the heel doesn't feel itself. It doesn't think, oh no, this is going to be so and so. The brain, because it's so full of thought and it knows itself, it doesn't want to do it. It's much harder for it to do it. Again, the same idea by people that are learned, it's much harder for them to exhibit self-sacrifice. To give an example that is closer to our world, Baruch Hashem, the Rebbe wrote many letters to people that were scholars, and he said, and they asked him whether they're pater, whether they are not obligated to go do mivtzaim. Exempt. To go do mivtzaim, to go put tefillin on people, for instance. So you have this great scholar. He's sitting in the yeshiva all day, in the kollel all day. He's sitting and learning. He's a great scholar. Yeah. Do I also have to go outside and talk to simple people and get them to put tefillin on? Wow. So the Rebbe said to them, "Of course you do." That's the Mesiras Nefesh, and the very fact that they would even ask this, that indicates that the more a person is conscious, and here he's conscious of very good things. It's not like he's thinking about his business or anything like that. He's saying, I can spend my time learning. So the Rebbe says that even though it's true, and every minute that you spend learning is worth much more than what other people are doing with their time, still, you too are obligated to sacrifice yourself. In this case, sacrifice yourself means to give yourself over to someone else. Because when I go put tefillin on, I don't get anything from it. The person who gets it is the person who puts tefillin on. They, in fact, if it's a karkafta, if it's a person who's never put on tefillin, so they've reached the level of yechida. They've reached the highest level of the soul when they do a mitzvah for the first time. I, at most, can look at it with yearning to be at that level. I'm never at that level. So he says the way that you reach that level is that you leave the base medrash, you leave the study hall, and you go out and you go and do the sacrifice yourself for someone else. You go do a favor for someone else. By the way, this always is mind-boggling about the Israeli army, that most of the people that are fighting right now, they have businesses and they have families and you can imagine what it takes for a person who has all that going on. You know, if you're 22, you just finished your regular service. You're 23. You came back from a trip to the east. The brain is not filled with so many things that would inhibit being in a place which requires self-sacrifice. But when you're 40 years old, and you know the army in Israel is built on these reservists. That's exactly what it's built. Regular people. A month ago, they were running their businesses. They were with their families. They have 4 or 5 kids. Some of them have 10 kids, whatever it is. And they have to go and fight this war. So you can imagine what that requires, what amount of discipline that requires on the mind, not to think of what you left behind. It's an incredible thing. For that reason, it says that in the time of King David, before they went out to war, they would give a divorce contract to their wives. And they had to give a divorce contract because without that, apparently it's impossible for a person to concentrate on what he needs to do right now, unfortunately. It's not what he wanted to do. That's not what he built his life around. That's not his life. But this is what he needs to do. So he has to be free of all his previous obligations. Uchechol anal. So now we're coming to the point of all this. All of this will now explain to us. Yuvan ba'avodah b'nefesh ha'adam. So now we'll understand something very basic about the psyche. Dinei ktiv ani yeshena vegaluta v'libi il. The verse says in Song of Songs, I'm asleep, but my heart is awake. So the way the sages understand this, I am asleep when I'm in exile. During the exile we're asleep in a certain sense, but our heart is awake. V'inyan ha'shena, what does it mean to be asleep? Hu she'akochot pnimiyim. By the way, this is very related to the Mittler Rebbe, whose Yortzeit is coming on. His last mimer was about this topic. The mimer that he passed on in the middle of. He was in the middle of saying it, and then he passed away. V'inyan ha'shena hu she'akochot ha'pnimiyim mochinu midot mustarim v'ne'elamim ve'enam meirim begilui. What does it mean to be asleep? Sleep means that you don't have consciousness. That's really what it means. Everything else continues the same way. But your consciousness is not functioning. And so, your intellect, your emotions are concealed. It's not that they don't exist. They're there, but they're concealed. They cannot be openly felt. U'kamochen zman hashlishi nikra sheina. Sorry. I don't know what he means here. Oh, now I understand. Zman hagalut nikra sheina. When we're in exile, it's likened to being asleep. Meaning, why is the exile likened to being asleep? Because our intellect and our emotions are missing. What does it mean? Say to a person today, we're all in exile now. Because the Jewish people are in exile still. Until the base of Mikdash is not built, we're still in exile. So you come to a person and say, Yaakov, are you not conscious of yourself? You don't have intellect? Of course you have intellect. Of course I have emotions. So what do you mean we're asleep? So the simple meaning is at the what we call the national level, the totality of Jewish life is asleep.
Gestalt.
We know, right, the Gestalt.
Yeah.
So we know that we have no head. That there's no question of. We have no leadership. We know we definitely have no intellect. I mean, when you look at the level of intellect that we used to have and the way we are now,
Yeah.
we're a shadow of ourselves. But what's even worse is we have no emotions. And sometimes the emotions come up, like now because of a war, but in general, there's no feeling of burning desire to change the world. It doesn't exist inside. That's what Avram was about. Avram was about going out to the world and changing them. The Rebbe tried. He was one of the few people that was awake. It doesn't help though. Like what did the Baal Shem Tov say? The Baal Shem Tov said his name is Yisrael because he's like the word that you can say to someone who's asleep and wake him up. When somebody's asleep and you want to wake them up, what do you say? You call their name. You can say all kinds of things next to them, they won't wake up. But if you call their name, suddenly they'll wake up. So he says, I'm the charm that when you say my name, Israel, suddenly the people of Israel wake up. That's how he explained it. What does it mean to wake up? So it's to explain to people that, listen, you have to be awake means, first and foremost, not to be defensive. Stop being defensive. Stop thinking, stop belittling yourself. Stop putting yourself down. Stop thinking that you're not capable. You are capable of much, much more than yourself. And the Rebbe said this on all fronts. To the frum people, he said, get out there and teach everyone and show them Torah and mitzvahs. To the Zionists, he said, stop belittling yourself. You have much more power than you think. The world's not going to eat you up. They're waiting for you to make a stance on things that are moral. They're waiting for you to have an opinion about what's right and what's wrong, because they don't know. The world's lost. It has moral relativism everywhere. They have no clue what to say. Who's to say? They're all like Lavan and Betuel. How do we know the Lavan and Betuel were evil people? Negative people. They had no morals because they said, "This what you Eliezer are telling us came out of God," meaning it's predetermined. How can we say something good or bad? What do you mean? If something is from God, it's not good? You don't understand if something is from God, it's good? How could it? I don't know if it's good or bad. What do you mean? Of course it's good. But that means moral relativism. They're so lost. They have no clue. And that leads to deterioration. That's the main thing that we have to pump out to the world today. Look, if you don't make a stance now, it's going to eat you up because you've morally deteriorated. You have no character left. You have no moral character left. Anyway, we have to continue tomorrow, God willing.